Or to the cloud. Hey everybody, it's Tara Shaver with AARP's Office of Volunteer Engagement, and we are here with a special episode of the Roost News where we are talking about our raring to go and return in person. This is our first episode where we are talking about the requirements of returning to that in-person environment, and I know everyone is eager to hear more, and I am very excited to be here with a new friend of mine, Tiffany, from my favorite city in all of America, San Diego, because of the weather. And Tiffany, she was complaining that it's 85 degrees there today. And I said, oh, Tiffany, please enjoy that 85 degrees because we've been exceeding hundreds in the heat index and we are dying here in the South. So Tiffany, tell us how long you've been with AARP and what your role is there with AARP in California.
Definitely. First off, just want to thank Team OVE for inviting me to this conversation. And yes, very blessed to live here in San Diego. So I work with the California State Office as a Program and Community Engagement Analyst. I've been with AARP for almost 2 years now, but fun fact, I was an intern in my undergraduate years. So that definitely helped get that exposure to AARP early because, I started during the pandemic, had to really create new relationships online, but I had some familiarity of the organization and the volunteers from my internship days, which made a huge difference.
Great. You see, my puppies came to join the conversation. They love it when I start talking to my computer. They think that it's big, big excitement over here. And I'm also here, lucky me, with my friend and colleague, Kathy Hines, who is with the Office of Volunteer Engagement as well. Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started diving in to our requirements.
Hey, Tara, thank you. Hi, Tiffany. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. And the requirements piece, we're going to focus in just a minute on the Get Back Together meeting that Tiffany held with her volunteers and some staff colleagues. And before we dive in there, which is what a lot of folks are eager to hear about, it seems only fair to say, what were you doing right before, right? So what did the pandemic world look like for you, Tiffany, with the teams that you're working with in San Diego? Just give us a little flavor of what the teams were like and how you were getting together with them.
Yeah, definitely. Before the pandemic, our teams did meet within their regions. So we had a central team and a south team. Obviously, as we pivoted to the pandemic and online, it made more sense just to host a all together team meeting on Zoom. And, it kind of ebbed and flowed on the participation. But I think as we continue to build out the agenda and kind of keep people in the loop without feeling like they're stringing them along till we get back in person, we kept a strong engagement on Zoom. And I think there was a really great piece to continue to engage with our volunteers because as we all know, the relationship piece is critical. Even a 1-hour meeting once a month just to say, here's what AARP is looking at, here are some resources that you may not know about, here's all the virtual programming that we're doing, and made a big difference. And one key thing that I worked on that I think really helped was building people's Zoom comfortability. We test different tools and try to make it fun because I know there was an initial barrier to that, and it's made a big difference. And I think now Zoom and online is kind of an accepted norm for many people, but I don't want to miss that a good half of our volunteers were still, hey, I really like in-person. I'll be ready to go when you do in-person. Just let us know the date. As we all know, that kept getting pushed back and getting pushed back. So it's just finding different ways to engage people and continuing to check in with them so they knew that we were still wanting to be in relationship with the volunteers.
Wonderful. Thank you. So yeah, we heard it's fabulous that you did that, right? So you moved from in-person to, rather than saying we're not going to do 3 different Zoom or 2 different Zoom meetings and do the exact same thing, it's virtual. Let's just get together all together. And I know some other states that did that. So folks met statewide or countywide or whatever it would be and just collapsed in a way that collapsed those teams for whoever wanted to come to the party. And that's exactly what we asked folks to do. Just stay there, be present, invite whoever wants to come to the party, and just trust that it's going to work out. So now you're ready to go back to in-person, and you also are not ready to give up the virtual piece because you built that muscle, and it's going forward, it's something that you want to continue to be able to do. So why don't we flip? Tara, do you have any specific questions about the in-person gathering that Tiffany then moved to?
Oh, I'm just eager to hear how you started the planning and how you all got started, because I know it was a success. So I'm eager to hear all the nitty-gritty details.
I will do my best to cover all that for you. I will say it did help, and it was very encouraging when we were doing our Zoom meetings and ARP started to return back to the office. Many of the volunteers were then asking, hey, when are we going to be back to in person? I know, like I mentioned before, a lot of them were really just not wanting to do Zoom. And at that point, you can only try to push it so much. So it was acceptance of, hey, when we get back to in person, I'll be sure to invite you, and keeping them in the loop regularly on our emails, and that piece was helpful. So I already knew from the monthly Zoom meetings before, we did a anonymous poll. I think about 65% of them was like, yes, I'm ready to go for an in-person meeting, and I'm okay if I get to wear my mask. And then we did, oh, I'd rather be socially distanced, masked, and I'd like a hybrid option or not. And then I'd like to stay online at this time because we were still, very much in the pandemic. And having a anonymous poll like that was incredibly helpful just to see where everyone's at. And that gave me, I think, some solid ground to go, okay, we can push for in person because a good majority of them are ready to do in person. So from that, it was just finding the right space again with enough space, and then setting up um, the different protocols and processes and procurement to get a space. That's okay. We went for indoors just because I wanted to do a hybrid meeting, and from testing it out, you can't really do a hybrid meeting outdoors unless you have a rollout TV and all those different pieces. And then as soon as we got the guidance from OV and ARP about the in-person registration form, what that's going to look like, how are we going to roll that out through the portal or other ways. It was just constantly communicating with volunteers, setting deadlines on it, and also encouraging them, because what I did, which I think is probably the biggest push to actually get people to sign up the form, was here's our first event in person. If you don't fill out this form, you can't come, unfortunately. And that really encouraged a lot of people. I got a lot of phone calls about what's my portal password. Again, that's that's for them to figure out, right? Through, you can ask your portal champion, or you can do the forgot your password. Or I really do think that Microsoft form option was a huge help for a lot of people who hit roadblocks with the portal, because there was a firewall for some people and some people didn't. So the Microsoft form was incredibly helpful, as well as the volunteer helpline for encouraging people to go in person. And before we even started any major things, I actually started with an office cleanup party, because I really needed the support with office cleanup. So we started with just 5 volunteers. We did an office cleanup together. It was a great time. We got a lot
Wow, that's
done.
brilliant.
And so and then I got to check in with them and say, hey, how are you feeling about this? And it was good. They were just excited to be back. And then, word of mouth is incredibly powerful, and be like, okay, now tell your other volunteers, or who have we missed? Who haven't you seen online? And from there, I build out the list further of who we should be contacting and calling. And they were also calling them. So that was incredibly helpful too, when they were like, oh, we had such a great time doing this. Are you coming to the next meeting? And then rolling that out together. And fun fact, that's how the idea of the barbecue actually came together, because I thought it was hot. You would believe it wasn't hot, cleaning out the office, and they're like, oh, it'd be nice to get together like this again, and maybe share a meal. And I was like, I love barbecues in the summer. And we're like, why don't we do that for the volunteers? And I was like, you're right. Maybe let's do that for the volunteers as soon as it's okay. So we started kind of pitching that idea, got a lot of interest from the volunteers, set a date, and that really helped ramp up, bring out the people who weren't as engaged there. Who doesn't want to come for a barbecue, reconnect with old friends? And that was a really great incentive to fill out the form, get more acquainted with ARP, and then remember the experiences they had, because many of our volunteers have been volunteers for 10 plus years. So I think I told you, Kathy, it was a great experience to see everyone at that first team meeting. It was like a reunion, and people were just like, how's your kid, or how's your grandkids, or how's this? So it was really powerful to see. So
Hey,
I
Tiffany?
yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I want to dive back into that, the meeting and what you did there. But before you go, just so many things that you just said. I'm like, oh, that's fabulous. One is it was almost a 2-stage invite. So the invitation to fill out the registration form got more impactful when you offered an in-person event that apparently was really a popular one, because you said that helped a number of people hop the fence and say, I want to go to that. So I have to ask, what was the in-person event that caused so many people to go, okay, I'll fill out my form?
So first one was the office cleanup, which I was surprised and grateful that people were
Interesting.
willing. And then we started doing our monthly team meetings in person with the hybrid option. And so
Okay.
that was the next jump. And then I think the biggest jump was when we did all the volunteers, let's have this kind of more social event. We did the barbecue, and then we invited Antoine Cook, our portal champion, because everyone was, curious about how to use the portal again to share that with them. And so that was our biggest jump. And now I think most of our volunteers are signed up on the registration form.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that sort of caps off the registration form piece. Terry, you have a question or a thought?
Kathy, I don't know about you, but I'm wondering how I can do a volunteer office cleanup day in my home office. As a full-time teleworker, working in your home has become quite interesting by being here all the time.
Right. And the volunteer role I most need is post-it volunteer. Someone who feels comfortable cleaning up all these Post-its.
A Post-it manager. Okay, cool. That was it. Just a little fun.
So Tiffany, please, back to the barbecue reunion. I'm calling it reunion. Welcome back that you planned. If you could tell us a little bit about that, in particular, any piece of the requirements, what did you have to do to prepare it to get that ready, and then how did it go?
Definitely. So one piece, since we have 3 different regional teams, was still giving them an opportunity to connect across the county and meet other people, and then also learn some kind of new skill or a refresher on a previous one. And of course, share a meal together, because we've seen a lot of success. Saw on your team site, other people having great success with welcome back picnics and barbecues. So we went with that theme, and we did it in person, right? So we can have that hybrid option and have the computer piece. It was a big room, so we were able to separate. And what we did, which is really helpful, is each team lead for the region, I chatted with them, say, hey, can you call your team members or check in with them and see where they're at? And if they're able to go, let me know, so then I can double check on the portal side if they filled out their registration form, and if they had any trouble, then I would follow up with them and was able to say, here's the portal process. If that's not working for you, here's the Microsoft Forms process. If not, we have options to get it done, so they could participate in person. And it really helps to have those team leaders, because they have those relationships. They can also invite people in a different way than maybe I can, and that was really helpful to get people in the room. And we made everyone wear a mask, right? Because we want to be mindful of that, except when you're eating. It's been really helpful, and people really appreciated this, is getting all the food individually packaged. I will say we do not take special orders unless it's like a dietary restriction or vegetarian. So don't get caught in that, because it's a world of mess. I tried it. Just doing a bulk order, but asking for it individually packaged, and then getting that to people, so they feel safe about not too many people touching your food and things like that. So that was helpful. And then masking and socially distanced. And then really making a way for volunteers to connect without, making people feel like close or too close or in a tight space or whatnot. And I think that's why Israel, our new ASD, led a really wonderful activity with the paper planes, and having people kind of share some answers about themselves and read it to each other and connect. And it was a really meaningful experience. And you can tell a lot of people connected in ways, and there's a lot of shared experiences on why they love volunteering with AARP and what's something people don't know about them. And that was a great level setting to kind of help people feel more connected as we move forward.
I love that. I was just sharing with you that I was reading over your write-up in our Teams channel, where we have all these great stories and photos. So it's nice and fun to scroll through that thread. So tell us a little bit more about that airplane exercise, because I know just in the last week, I've had 3 people ask me what are ways that they can help do some team building, help reconnect people, or maybe help blend the folks who were around before COVID and maybe kind of took a step back with those who stepped right into the middle of all the stuff we were doing virtually. So tell us what that airplane exercise was, just in brief.
Definitely. I think icebreakers are always helpful. They have to be a little bit cheesy, right, to be an icebreaker. But it's having that space to reflect and maybe share something that you wouldn't have in a normal conversation. So Israel was really thoughtful in his questions. It was describe something that people may not know about you. What was your proudest moment? And then obviously bringing it back, why do you enjoy volunteering with ARP? And so it's just, not too deep of a question, but something enough to share. And there was a lot of similar answers. People were proud to be parents, or people were just really excited to be a part of our work as ARP and like live Ethel's story, things like that. So that was a really great connecting moment. There's a lot of other amazing icebreakers. I know Kathy has a bunch, or I think you were the one who shared the images of different dogs and how they're feeling, and then just having people connect, right? Just a space to start a conversation is always helpful.
Well, but I live in detail, so I'll say that what I loved about the icebreaker, in addition to the questions, which is kind of the core of it, was just the mechanics. That each volunteer, they had color pieces of paper. Each volunteer picked a color piece of paper. They wrote those 3 questions. They folded it into an airplane. They had a miserable time trying to actually fly the airplane, so everybody laughed over what a fail that was. But the airplanes all ended up on the floor, and then the instruction was go pick up a color that's different than the one you chose, which was an easy way to avoid people getting their own, right? Because we've all been there. I got my own. What do I do? Like, so go for a different color. They picked up a different color. They read it, and then I think they went and found the person and they talked, right, Tiffany? And then they kind of debriefed that. What did you learn about each other? So really nice way to just, as you say, Tiffany, reflect, self-reflect, connect, debrief as a group, laugh a little. It was just really beautifully done.
Appreciate that. And yeah, laughter really makes a difference in everything that you do, in my opinion.
The other piece that you mentioned, the other piece you mentioned, I think, was Antoine came. So as part of your getting back together, am I right? There was a portal piece, or did I make that up?
That is correct, because it's always helpful, right, to get some kind of training in. And the overwhelming feedback often is the portal is confusing or hard, or they haven't accessed it in a while. What does that look like? So who better to bring than Antoine Cook, our portal champion, who lives and breathes the portal. So he came and led a session. So we had people bring their computers or iPads, or you can get the app on your phone, and they followed along with Antoine as he did the step-by-step with the reimbursement process, finding events, things like that. And I will note, with portal training, you have to keep it up and keep doing it. It's not just a one time and you're done. It's really just, you use it or lose it. So having that intro with him and then reinforcing it by encouraging the portal use has been helpful to get people on it more often.
Great. Thank you. Tara, back to you for any last questions.
Yeah, so I am always curious, is there anything that you wish you had done either differently, or maybe that you had added, or even that all-time favorite that we don't always talk about at AARP? Is there something you would have left out? Did you cram in too much? Did you feel it was just right? How did you feel as you reflect back? And is there anything that you would give as a piece of advice to some of your colleagues who are, planning their first return to in-person experience and are maybe on the ramp to making this transition from virtual to back in person and or hybrid?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for my situation, one thing I really benefited from, but I wish maybe it started earlier, was actually calling all the volunteers before we went back to in-person, just to check in and see where they're at. Because there were some things that come up that I was like, oh, I wasn't aware of that with your situation, or thank you for letting me know. And I kind of, felt like I was catching up on some ground. So I think probably also because I was new and they were still introducing myself to them. But I think that is really helpful to have that connection, and then really encouraging them to stay on the loop with the email communications and things like that. I think would have been helpful instead of having to call and follow up with each person. But it's still good practice. And then if you can, if you're planning right now your return to in person, I think taking it slow and in chunks is helpful, because I will be honest with you, there was one week where we hit 3 in-person events in a weekend, and it was too much. And thankfully we were able to pull out of one of them, but just time it right for yourself. I got a little eager and excited. And then if you could emphasize more as you're starting your process about reintroducing some of the ARP stuff, because it's a lot of things have changed, right, the last few years. And biggest thing learning, I know we're still figuring out with the new brand, but that was the biggest thing. We're like, wait, what do you mean I can't use this, or is this different? And so I think talking about that early and kind of noting, here are some of the new tools that we have available, some of the new things that we can talk about, some of the things we don't want to talk about anymore, and move on from is helpful to kind of set the groundwork earlier. And then, yeah, just setting up your plan in chunks and don't go too much in right from the start.
No 3 events in a weekend. I think that's good advice. Probably all the time. I know we get really crazy sometimes, but I love what you planned with that office cleanup. And as you were talking about the brand transition and even some of the priority topics that we may have been talking about before the pandemic that we maybe are not talking about anymore, we're talking about them differently. Combining that with like an office cleanup, or as we used to call it, a workroom cleanup day, where you get to get rid of some of the old materials. You talk about why you're taking a look at the brand. That's also kind of a way to do a bit of a tactical approach to that cleanup that needs to happen anyway. So you've given me all kinds of ideas for some of my colleagues who I know, like you, also had started right at the beginning of all of this. And you had a little bit of a leg up as being an intern, but you're not alone. There are so many people who started this role in community outreach or in volunteer engagement, and were maybe not even a few days in when everything shut down. They started in the middle of, this virtual world. And so it's been such a different experience for them. And I know some of them have really said, how do I start to go in person with people that I really have only connected with virtually, or maybe not at all if they decided to take a step back. So I love that you had those tips for you really connecting with people, making some one-on-one contacts before making some of those invitations, and just kind of getting an update. And volunteer leaders, of course, can help with that as well. So thank you for that. Tiffany, anything else that we haven't talked about that you think would be good for the group to hear?
Last thing I just want to note from your previous question is consistency is really helpful, and not changing up the messaging too often. So I will be honest, I think from the start I would have hit a masks required for all meetings or not, because I think going back and forth kind of sometimes confuses people. Like, hey, we didn't have to do it last time, but I'm like, oh, now we're moving towards the media and we want to be mindful. So I think if you're gonna go with that and you're comfortable with that, just stick with it is helpful. And then same with the consistency on the other end for people who want to join on Zoom, offering that option and making it built into your meeting. So hybrid is the norm is my hope for the future. And I think we're getting there. I did have to work through some tech things to start, but the hybrid meeting setup was able to work well and everyone was able to hear each other and engage. So that's the hope moving forward, that's just kind of the norm, and we can be flexible and adaptable with our current environment.
Oh, I can't leave that alone. So it sounds like you at least have one tip for hybrid meetings. Like when you say we got it to work, is there anything you discovered or you would recommend to folks that are either having their own struggles or even just thinking about it?
Yeah, definitely. If you're doing it outside of your office, make sure you have all the right cables, because the library has a different cable than another location will have. And honestly, I benefited from using 2 devices if that's possible. So I use one device on the meeting table so you can see people as if you were sitting on the table, and then that way I have access in managing the Zoom, but then I have another device hooked up to a projector screen so you can see everyone on the big screen. I can show any PowerPoint slides that we have. So that is kind of my best setup. And then if you have an external speaker just for added volume, it's always helpful there. But I think 2 devices is helpful. And then always checking in with people on Zoom, because I've been in meetings where they forget the people on Zoom and you're just like, hello, please, I'm here, I have a question. So be mindful of that. If you want some more specifics on logistics, happy to help too. I found a wireless mic that works really well for Zoom meetings that you can pass around if you need to. And then I use actually our docking station box for our computers as our external speaker because it's pretty loud. So that's been really helpful too. I just bring that with me and it keeps my computer charged. So that's
wonderful.
been so trying to use what we already have. Yeah.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I know I have a Jabra wireless speaker. Kathy, if yours is sitting there close to you, maybe you could show it. We invested in these a while back, and I've used mine for that purpose as well, Tiffany. It has great sound quality for the people who are speaking in it. And it also has a pretty loud speaker for listening. So it's really helpful to take around. So folks have got on that job or train. We know that also works well. And I love the idea of taking your docking station, because you're right, it keeps your computer charged. It gives you all those opportunities to have everything you need and have those extra cables as well to plug in without having to think, uh-oh, I didn't realize my laptop didn't have that port, which happened to me in a meeting recently. So totally understand. Yep. Well, thank you, Kathy. Anything else that's come to mind as we talked about this part?
Oh, there's always something else that comes to mind. I'll say it and then I'll stop, I promise, which is your point about hybrid meetings and remembering people on Zoom makes me think that there's actually a new volunteer role there, which is, I'm the person that's watching out for the folks on Zoom. So I need to be the representative in the room, and we could come up, Tara, you, Tiffany, come up with some fun name for that. It's the Zoom czar or czarina or something, but somebody whose job it is to watch out for their people on Zoom would be a fun volunteer role. So thank you for thinking of that.
One thing I want to add on that too, and what you're pointing out is so critical. Sometimes it's hard to, when you're caught up in everything, is include your volunteer leaders. Like obviously they want to help and they're just waiting for the right role. And some of them take initiative, which is amazing. But I had this moment when I felt like I was running around with my head cut off trying to set up the Zoom, and then the tables and chairs weren't there. And a volunteer just literally said, stop, ask for help. I will do the chairs and on tables, and next time you'll teach me the Zoom, because, and I was like, oh, because we just get into it and we're going. So don't forget your volunteer leaders want to be involved, and they're there to help, and they're also way more amazing than I'll ever be. So it's like, yeah, pass it to them.
Gosh, we learned so much, didn't we? Like through the virtual stuff about how many roles there could possibly be so that everything runs smoothly. And that's something I hope we don't lose as we go back, not just because of hybrid, but like you just said, you're in your head, you've got all the stuff, right? Like all the details that need to happen. It's like, that's why a really quick check-in and just an assignment of roles is so important. And it takes just a few moments to run through everything that needs to happen, because it's going to happen for almost every single meeting that we have. And it's so great to get people involved in that, including that technical aspect, including the checking out for the chat box to see if anybody's raising their hands, all those things that we do normally, can transfer across that space. And I think that is an awesome advice. And it's a great piece to end on, unless there's anything else, ladies. Anything else? No? Okay. We're going to have to do this again. This is too much fun, Tiffany. I'm going to be home watching YouTube videos of San Diego this weekend and enjoying the nice, cool air conditioning here in Nashville, Tennessee. Kathy, my friend, it's always fun to get to do stuff like this with you. And we hope you all learned something today. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for rolling with it this morning as we talked about so many different ways to approach the requirements that we have to return to in-person, as well as all those things that happen around the edges. Friends, thanks for listening to this special edition of the Roost News. We will see you next time. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.